Good evening. I'm Jennifer Rabb and have the extraordinary privilege of being the president of this phenomenal institution, Hunter College, home of the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you tonight to Roosevelt House for this exceptionally special occasion, marking the 100th anniversary of the American entry into World War I. As I hope many of you notice as you enter tonight, Roosevelt House is marking the centennial with a major exhibition examining the Roosevelt family's crucial role in the Great War. As it happened, FDR and Ellen rented out this townhouse and headed to Washington for the duration. There, Roosevelt took up the responsibilities as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and his wife became a volunteer Red Cross nurse. Like many of our best New York soldiers and sailors, Franklin soon headed to the war-torn European front, where with incredible and inspiring vigor, he saw the situation from seaplanes, inspected warships, and visited the front, dressed, I might add, in a special uniform he designed himself. It was in World War I that FDR learned firsthand the brutal realities of modern combat, knowledge he would carry into World War II, during which he did nothing less than save the free world. No longer able to jump off of planes or mount railroad cars, President Roosevelt still had the strength to lead from experience. Aside from law school, World War I was FDR's higher education. It was a defining experience, as we'll learn tonight, for many other New Yorkers as well, thrown into high-tech violence, the likes of which they had never seen or imagined, subjected to tests of courage and stamina that took millions of lives. The survivors, the lost generation, bore their emotional scars for life. When FDR returned to this house, he too was a changed man, matured by war, inspired by public service, and prepared even to face the biggest challenge of his own life, disease, recovery, and the rehabilitation from polio he accomplished right here in this home. I can't think then of a more appropriate site than this one for the debut of the haunting drama that our friend, the brilliant actor Stephen Lang, has created for this centennial year and this living landmark. Speaking of living landmarks, I would just like to say that Bill Vandenhoom walked in as we said living landmarks, so we have to give him a round of applause. I didn't think we'd have one more actor than we have Bill. I'm not going to give any more of the plot away, but I will be very pleased to welcome the participants. The narrator will be our own Jonathan Fanton, Roosevelt House Director, the historian Harold Holzer. Known, of course, for his expertise in the Civil War, tonight he will show his true military versatility. Portraying the quintessential Broadway baby Damon Runyon, who served his own time as a war correspondent during World War I, is two-time Tony winner James Naughton, who's been honored for his unforgettable turns in the musicals City of Angels and Chicago, and also has a standout career in film and television, including roles in The Paper Chase, First Wives Club, and The Devil Wears Prada. Finally, we welcome the amazing, ageless Stephen Lang, on leave just for tonight's debut from filming the sequel to the smash hit movie Avatar. He stands at the very peak of a career that has included A Few Good Men, Death of a Salesman on Broadway, and films such as Gettysburg, Tombstones, Gods and Generals, and the recent cult classic Don't Breathe. Stephen's one-man show Beyond Glory, chronicling generations of Medal of Honor recipients, has taken him from America to Afghanistan, performances recently captured for an amazing documentary film. Steve is also an honorary member of the Hunter family. His Aunt Barbara is a Hunter graduate, his sister Jane is with us today, and his dear, wonderful father, Eugene Lang, founder of the incredible I Have a Dream Foundation, who we sadly lost this last year, was a longtime supporter of Hunter's mission. I was very proud to call Gene a friend, and we're so happy to have the Lang family here with us today. And we would like Jane and to Stephen to honor your dad with dedicating this performance to his memory. He was such an important representation of the Hunter motto, Mihi Cura Futuri, the care of the future is mine. He lived that, and tonight his memory lives on in Steve. So Harold, it's a pleasure to bring you up to the podium to introduce his Dark Land and our actors. Thank you.
100 years ago, on a freezing February day in Washington, D.C., President Woodrow Wilson motored from the White House up to Capitol Hill and there stood before Congress to pledge that we will not choose the path of submission and suffer the most sacred rights of our nation and our people to be ignored or violated. The only answer, he insisted that day, was to accept this challenge of hostile purpose by fighting back to make the world safe for democracy. Congress must declare war against the Imperial German government. The day has come, Wilson said, when America is privileged to spend her blood and her might for the principles that gave her birth, happiness, and the peace which she has treasured. Wilson got his authorization for war, accompanied by applause from the senators and congressmen and cheers from the American press. But it was said that when he returned to the White House, Wilson buried his head in his hands and wept. People he knew, perhaps he knew much more than those he had labored to convince otherwise, what pain was yet to come. Ordinary Americans, the ones who are always called on to fight their leaders' wars, responded much as patriots always have, by enlisting, submitting to the draft, much as they hoped to stay home. They mobilized, trained, put on doughboy uniforms, and then crossed the sea into the uncertainty of a high-tech war so deadly that it threatened to render as primitive the awesome horrors of the Civil War, a conflict then barely 50 years old, with many of its veterans still alive to tell the tales of their own suffering. As we've heard, for privileged but public-spirited men like Roosevelt, there was a purpose as well. The chance, he said years later, to make the world a place where freedom can live and grow into the ages. Back in 1917, waging war to end war, to make freedom live and grow, seemed somehow achievable. If only the Hun could be subdued. It certainly seemed so even when President Wilson introduced, pushed, and signed an espionage law that chilled homefront dissent, made interference with recruitment illegal, and stifled free speech as no administration ever had. Making freedom live and grow must have seemed achievable even as women reminded America that they had been omitted from the dream and rekindled their demands for the long-denied right to vote. For as Carrie Chapman Carr pointed out that year, what otherwise was the point of fighting? Since for every soldier who straps on his knapsack and marches away to camp, bound later for somewhere in France, there was a mother and wife who weeps to see him go, and a woman to step forward to take his place in industry. These women were fighting for democracy too, for what Carr called the right to have a voice in their own government. Everybody should count, Carrie Carr insisted, in applying democracy. But even though women finally got the right to vote in New York State 100 years ago this year, 3 more winters would pass before women's suffrage became a national right guaranteed by the Constitution. Protecting democracy must have seemed achievable, historic lessons to the contrary, even to the patriotic African Americans who quickly volunteered for the armed forces en masse, even as Southerners opposed their taking up arms, even when riots broke out in Houston and East St. Louis, during which black women were dragged from their homes or hauled off public transportation, during which white men beat black men to death on the streets for being insolent, triggering a mass migration to the north that approached the level of a biblical exodus. Finally, the idea of protecting democracy must have seemed not only possible, but worthwhile, even thrilling, to the polyglot of men who marched off to war down Fifth Avenue exactly 100 years ago. Citizens from all neighborhoods of the big town who found themselves attached to a soon-to-be legendary unit known as the 77th Division of the 307th Infantry Regiment of the Army of the United States. And that's our story for this evening. And one of these great coincidences that links history and literature, Damon Runyon was there too. Already a famous reporter and a short story writer with amazing descriptive powers and an ear for the New York patois, watching those soldiers parade down the boulevard. The man who had invented Harry the Horse, Nathan Detroit, and Good Time Charlie now watched a whole new panoply of unusual, dare we say, Runyon-esque characters tramping down the street on a warm autumn day, as he put it, in straggling columns between walls of cheering people, wearing vintage straw hats, some in rumpled Palm Beach suits, and others in overalls, having come direct from their jobs to appear in the first parade of drafted men on Manhattan Island. Some, as Runyon almost sneered, had come from the ornate houses of Park Avenue on the upper reaches of the 60s and 70s. I'm sure FDR didn't see that. But many more hailed from the Lower East Side, he wrote, Harlem, Broadway, and the Bronx. Now all of them were processing together to the blaring strains of George M. Cohan's anthem, Over There. The Yanks were coming, and they included the sons and daughters of immigrants, Irishmen, Italians, Asians, and Jews. The night before, things had been slightly less, shall we say, cohesive. The boys had been celebrating, enjoying a final blast before giving up their civilian freedom. Maybe too much liquid had flowed. Officers from Plattsburgh had no luck that night keeping order among the recruits from Mill Basin. Hester Street quarreled with Greenwich Village, not the long-haired area populated by artists and musicians, Runyon quickly added, but from the harder, close-cropped region around the docks. There were Chinamen from Mott Street, Jews and Italians all jabbering in their own language at once. Cobbled together, hungover, bruised from a night of drinking and brawling, somehow they now gave the impression that morning on Fifth Avenue that they had cohered into a seamless unit, a fighting force of intensely loyal, hyphenated Americans. And some of these very same faces, Runyon later swore, he glimpsed again just 1 year later when he was sent by the New York American to Europe. There he found the men of the 77th staring glassily now under biscuit-shaped steel helmets in the muddy columns that tramped out of the Argonne Forest. And that was after one of the most storied, improbable, heroic acts of resistance in the entire war. These New Yorkers, trapped under what the headlines called a siege of captivity in that bloody, rain-soaked forest, and led by a one-time white-glove lawyer named Charles Whittlesey, a tall, lean-flanked fellow around 40 years old with a funny little smile, Runyon wrote, Wisconsin-born, a Williams College graduate who had gone to Harvard Law School, and then on to precisely the career expected from a family steeped in tradition, yet with a bit of the bohemian, always percolating within him, for he had voted not for Woodrow Wilson for president, but for his socialist opponent for the presidency, Eugene V. Debs, a complicated man. When he reached France, citizen officer Whittlesey reported to General Robert Alexander, himself from a long line of distinguished soldiers, who considered Whittlesey the division's great anchor man, and now ordered him to advance into the Argonne Forest and hold his position at all costs. Whittlesey somehow did so for so long, so deprived of food, so cut off from communications, comrades, and hope, that his unit became known as the Lost Battalion. How did they get lost in the first place? Well, the jury's still out, but we know that advancing into the woods near a place called Charlevaux Mill, the 9 companies in the battalion believed they were covered by their French allies. They moved too quickly, or they gave the wrong coordinates of their position. Now they were trapped and under repeated attack by the Germans, food cut off, water available only by crawling to a stream in full view of the well-armed enemy. Our artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us, wrote Whittlesey. For heaven's sake, stop it. but the Allies didn't. Of the 550 men of the battalion who started the week in what was called a pocket, fewer than 200 survived unwounded. And the lost battalion entered the realm of myth, with a Medal of Honor conveyed to Whittlesey for heroism under fire and perhaps as consolation for being left in harm's way for so long. Others have testified to their endurance far better than I can, even than Runyon could, including the gifted historians who later revealed their mistakes and their courage. 100 years ago, a wealthy Chicago-born suffragist named Mary Borden, she'd been arrested once for throwing a rock through a shop window during a right-to-vote rally in London, put her budding career as a poet in check, used her own money to create a field hospital on the front lines in Europe, and there served as a battlefield nurse, glimpsing indelibly the impact of the war on the men who had crossed the ocean to fight for democracy. There she glimpsed not only the bleached bones littering the field, glad that they were at last and at least beyond suffering, but with far greater horror beheld new recruits waiting to enter the fray, and some charred veterans, like Whittlesey's men, magically found after being so long lost, still bearing their weapons, still gritting their teeth, some still smiling, but their eyes somewhat vacant now, perhaps never again to be quite the same. This is the verse Mary Borden was moved to write. She could easily have been writing specifically about the Lost Battalion, and even more specifically, about Charles Whittlesey. Look close at this man. Look, he waits for death. He knows. He watches it approach. He hears it coming. He can feel it underneath his feet. Death bearing down on him from every side, violent death. Death that tears the sky to shrieking pieces. Death that suddenly explodes out of the dreadful bowels of the earth. He hears it screaming through the frantic air. He hears it burrowing underneath the ground. He feels the impact of it on his back, his chest, his legs, his belly, and his arms. He does not move. In all the landscape, there is just one thing that does not move: the figure of this man.
I have a rendezvous with death at some disputed barricade when spring comes back with rustling shade and apple blossoms fill the air. I have a rendezvous with death when spring brings back blue days and fair. It may be he shall take my hand and lead me into his dark land and close my eyes and quench my breath. It may be I shall pass him still. I have a rendezvous with
Just a moment. Colonel, please. Colonel Whittlesey, before you. Please, sir, could you just give me a moment? You see, Colonel, there are a few loose ends, a few circumstances that are foggy. A murky detail or two, a disputed fact or two. Sir, really, do you mind?
you. I mind what? What do you want? Who are you?
Me, I'm nobody really. I'm a scribbler, a scribe, just taking notes. Well, then again, I suppose I am the voice of the people. And I'm quite certain that the people, well, I don't know if they have the right to know, but I know that they want to know, or I know that they will want to know.
Will want to know what?
Oh, quite a few things, I suppose. But for starters, Colonel, could you? I think that they would like to know, for instance, why you, Colonel Charles Whittlesey, on this lovely moonlit night, November 26, 1921, standing on the afterdeck of the United Fruit Company steamship Taloa, bound for Havana, after a reportedly genial and hearty dinner with its captain, are about to commit suicide by pitching yourself into the very cold and very lonely, vasty deeps of the Atlantic Ocean. Could you tell me that, for starters?
I don't know that I can. I don't think so. I'm sorry. Now, if you'll excuse me.
But did you really tell them to go to hell?
I beg your pardon?
The Germans, you know. When the German commander demanded your surrender, did you reply, go to hell? Everyone says that you did. That's what the papers say.
Well, it isn't true, and I don't care what the papers say. I never said it. I may have thought it. I don't know. I can't recall, but I know I never said it.
Well, now that's my point. You see, things get embellished, they get embroidered, and it's important, I think, to set the record straight.
Why?
Why? Well, frankly, Colonel, something's out of whack here. You see, some things just don't add up. Because let's face it, Colonel, you are a genuine gold-plated American hero, recipient of the Medal of Honor, fabled commander of an action as mythically American as the Alamo and Custer's Last Stand. Completely surrounded, hopelessly outnumbered, and the papers say you told the Hun, go to hell. No?
No. I just would not say that. It would not be natural for me to say. It would not be in my nature to say that.
Well, your nature, what do you mean by that? What is your nature?
I am, by nature, not loud. I am not profane. I am not dramatic. I am not of a heroic nature in the least. For goodness sake, I'm merely a lawyer. Like 1,000 others, I just answered the call.
Oh, yeah, the call. You mean, to arms, it's up to you. Don't read American history, make it. First to fight, over the top, destroy the brute. Don't wait, volunteer. Come on, boys, together we win. Arise, Americans, the sword is drawn. For home and country, forward, enlist now, it's your duty, lad. Keep the world safe for democracy. Wake up, America, these colors won't run. Halt the Hun. I want you. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I suppose. something like that.
Kind of surprising, coming from a confirmed socialist such as yourself.
I'm hardly a socialist.
Well, now, you can't deny that you were. I mean, it's right here in my notes. You voted for Debs in 12, didn't you? Didn't you? Huh? Waste of a good vote. I mean, why bother? See, I know a good deal about you, Colonel.
Look, Mr.
Runyon.
Runyon, it is also not in my nature to be rude. However, at present I am somewhat preoccupied. This really is not a good moment.
Au contraire, mon Colonel. This really is the only moment. Look, Charles, may I call you Charles? We both know how this ends. But really, what's the rush? I mean, it's a lovely night. Moon, stars, a balmy breeze. Dawn is hours away, so why not step back just for a moment? Just step back from the edge, just for a little while. I understand that you're a wonderful conversationalist. Look, Charlie, I'm not here to talk you down or to try to stop you from doing what you're going to do. I don't plan to get out of this chair. Hell, I'm not even here. I'm just a disorderly pile of speculation, anxiety, and regrets. Just a nudge looking for a story. It won't take long. I ain't got that much time myself. I got a deadline to meet. And I guess you do too, huh? Please.
What do you wish to know, Mr.
Runyon. Well, first of all, I'd like to confirm a few details. My employer, Mr. Hurst, is a stickler for details. Absolutely requires that we get them right before we whitewash them or paint them yellow. So let's see. Whittlesey, Charles W. Ancestry goes back to the Puritans. Family prosperous but not filthy rich. Williams College, 05. Roommate and best buddy. Now this is interesting. Max Eastman. Now, there is a charismatic fellow and a man of conviction. He just happens to change his convictions on a monthly basis. But anyway, that would account for the socialism. Fell under Maxie's spell, did you? Huh? Where was I? Unmarried. Seriously considered becoming a missionary. Socialist? Missionary? Just trying on different collars?
They're not so different, really. Striving for universal brotherhood. The struggle to maintain faith.
And how is that working out?
I have moral yearnings.
What does that mean?
I wanted to do something that I did not want to do.
Well, that sounds strenuous.
I decided against it.
Perhaps you didn't want to not do it enough.
Perhaps.
And then the war came.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Really? Mr. Runyon? Have you not been paying attention these past 3 years? I've done little else but tell about the war. I told the newspapers. I've spoken over the wireless. I've campaigned ceaselessly for the Liberty Loan. I've consoled the widows and the mothers and the orphans. I posed, yes, that's the exact word, posed for the photographers and the newsreel cameras. Oh, greatness seems to have been thrust upon me. I've stumbled into a fame I did not seek, into public celebrity for which I am temperamentally unsuited, and through it all I've smiled my, how did you put it? Oh yes, I know who you are, Mr. Runyon. Through it all I've smiled my funny little smile. Your words.
Yes, I was struck by your smile. It was ambiguous.
Was it?
Well, it was not what I would call a happy smile, and I can well appreciate that. I mean, you had just emerged from a dire situation. But then again, you had emerged, and yet it was not that familiar soldier's smile of relief, that sort of guilty, better him than me smile. And neither was it a smile of determined satisfaction for a dirty job well done, nor a smile of grim gratitude when General Alexander said, "You are certainly a great anchor for the division," and promoted you to lieutenant colonel on the spot. You said nothing. You just smiled, that funny little smile.
An ambiguous smile.
An ironic smile?
Well, that is interesting.
How so?
But there certainly was plenty of irony to go around. Yes, it is true General Alexander promoted me, and yes, he did say I was the anchor of the division. He also said, you fought where you were caught. You see, his words and his tone both clearly implying that I had walked blindly into a trap.
Did you?
Walk into a trap? Of course, blindly. Not that I did. The forest of the Argonne was nothing more nor less than a trap. Headquarters knew that. I thought everybody knew that. The Germans had held it for 4 years. It was a maze of barbed wire entanglements, hidden tripwires, machine gun nests, camouflaged snipers, bunkers, trenches, dense underbrush, treacherous rocks, and ravines. The Argonne was a natural stronghold made stronger and infinitely more deadly by the hands of busy men. Oh yes, we walked into a trap. We were ordered to walk into it.
Yes, I see. So, the Lost Battalion.
Oh, please, I'm sorry. Don't use that term.
Lost Battalion?
I cannot bear the term.
Why, pray tell? It's a pip. I wish I'd come up with it myself. So does Mr. Hurst, by the way. What the hell's wrong with it?
It is not accurate.
Yeah, but it's legendary. Explain.
Yes, all right. All right. It's just that I want you to understand. I want to be entirely clear that this romanticized appellative Lost Battalion is and has been from the very beginning a complete and utter misnomer, which, no matter how poetically intended, I personally find both overwrought and florid, as well as quite offensive. Now, I apologize for my fervor, but I simply cannot abide melodramatic myth-making. In the first place, we were not, strictly speaking, a battalion at all, but rather something more. 7 companies of infantry and 1 machine gun company. By definition, a battalion is composed of 4 companies. We were rather more than that. Now, I understand that this is of little or no significance to you, to your readers, just facts, and who, apart from an attorney such as myself, cares a whit about the facts? No, I mention it merely to illustrate that if one cannot trust the probity of a book's cover, well, how then can one have any faith in the body of the work itself? Now, I will understand this impulse to glorify, the temptation to mythologize or really to propagandize, but I do not share that impulse. In fact, it revolts me. From the very start, there has been an unsavory odor of selective truth, if not downright mendacity, in the reportage, both official and unofficial, concerning the events in which I participated from the 2nd through the 7th of October 1918. We were rather more than a battalion. We were 554 men. Secondly, and I deem this highly significant, at no time were we in any sense of the word lost. I deem this significant on 2 counts at least. First, as it reflects on the integrity and the competence of the officer in command, myself, but far more galling as it reflects on the fortitude and the valor of my comrades in arms, the men under my command. At no time in any way do wish to construe the word were we lost. We knew exactly where we were, which was, in point of fact, the exact position to which we had been ordered. So at no time in a literal geographical sense were we lost. We were where we were supposed to be, and we got there at great cost. Yes, we did. And we stayed there for 5 days. So, as to the other sense of the word lost, it is abhorrent and beneath contempt for me to have to repudiate the implication that we were in any way, in any manner, subdued by the enemy, that we were in any fashion on the losing end. Suffice to say, we held our ground.
My goodness. For a man who's self-described as the soul of reticence and dispassion, you really are, well, neither.
You see, you've gotten me wound up.
Well, hey, don't stop now, Charlie. I mean, it's now or never. Literally.
Yes. It'll be dawn soon.
Well, not for a little while.
In early morn, when day is born, light shadows start to fade, I gaze upon a land shell-torn that war alone has made. And as the mists begin to lift, dim lines of hope I see.
What do you see?
Vision is fading, and by the will of fate, from behind barren walls comes a war dog, which makes my blood run chill. My vision's gone. I stand alone. My business here is to kill.
You write that?
One of my men, Lee Charles McCullum, Private McCullum, he published some poems. Most of it's doggerel, but some is quite good.
Well, I'm partial to doggerel. Most of what I write is doggerel. I'm known for my doggerel.
I'm the lucky son of a gun. I'm the guy that has the fun. My clothes were never spick and span, just plain Buck, the fighting man. It's the coming back I hate worst of all. Grates on my nerves, worse than gall. A wreck, they'll say when I land today, and with sighs of pity, they'll turn away.
Yes, they're coming home.
Standing here on this transport, watching it plow through the foam, there's just one thing I'm thinking of. That is, I'm going home. Oh, how I wish old pals of mine were going back with me. By will of God, they're still in the pocket, guarding eternity.
pals of mine were going back with me. Tell me about some of your old pals.
I was merely quoting. The words are from an enlisted man's point of view.
No old pals?
That's a luxury commander cannot afford. Oh, my respect, admiration, affection for those with whom I served is without limit or reservation. But it is not intimate friendship. That would be detrimental.
I see. What about the other officers? What about Holdeman or McMurtry?
Old pals? No. Courageous men. Fine. I recommended both for the Medal of Honor, which I am pleased that both received.
As did you.
That is of no consequence. But Nelson, Holdeman, he commanded the right flank. Wicked ground, exposed and uneven, vicious fighting, much of it hand to hand. He was wounded on the first day of the siege, October 2nd, but his leadership never faltered. Wounded again on the 4th, but remained in action, repulsing repeated attacks. Wounded yet a third time on the 5th, as he directed the flank assault against a hail of grenades and mortar shells. On the 6th, he made his way through machine gun fire and shells and carried 2 wounded soldiers to a place of relative safety. On the 7th, he dispersed the body of the enemy with pistol and grenade, and that same evening, when deadly liquid fire from it throws flames 20 meters or more. As this was directed at the flank, Captain Haldeman, weak with blood loss and fever, remained on his feet and rallied his men. You see, he kept the line organized through sheer will and strength of spirit, allaying panic among the men and preventing the envelopment of the flank, which would have spelled ruin for us all. The successful defense of the pocket was in large part due to his stubborn courage. For 5 days, through 5 days of fighting hunger, thirst, blood, and death, Captain Haldeman was a paragon of fortitude and inspiring bravery.
The Medal of Honor was well earned.
Indeed it was. And McMurtry, no less so. George was wounded on the 4th and again on the 6th, riddled with shrapnel from knee to shoulder. Yet he never faltered, but directed his men with unwavering optimism and a relentless assurance that fortified the hearts of every man on the line. He refused all relief and assistance until he personally led his men to safety on the 8th. Only then would he consent to be taken to hospital.
Another worthy recipient.
Worthy indeed. Fine men. I wish them both long and peaceful lives.
And you were awarded the Medal of Honor as well.
As I've said already, it's of no consequence.
Oh, come on, Colonel. It's of tremendous consequence.
Not to me.
To posterity.
This is where you started, isn't it? The loose ends, foggy facts, setting the record straight.
That's right, and this really is your only opportunity to do so. If not for posterity, well then, for yourself at least. Why is your Medal of Honor less consequential than Holdeman or McMurtry's? Did you not earn it?
Have you read the citation?
Yes. It's relatively brief.
One might almost say perfunctory. Apart from its brevity, you will note it is absent anything that could be considered above and beyond the call of duty. The citation notes that I held my command together while maintaining my position. This was nothing more nor less than my responsibility as commander, and though, while perhaps commendable, in no way rises to the criteria established for the Medal of Honor, so I must ask myself, why then did General Alexander recommend me for the nation's highest award for valor?
Well, the citation goes on to say that Major Whittlesey received from the enemy a written proposition for surrender, which he treated with contempt.
And that really is the crux of it, wouldn't you say? The mythic moment, as it were. Well, let me tell you what happened. An 18-year-old private, Lowell Hollingshead, was wounded in the leg and captured by the enemy. Lieutenant Heinrich Prinz, the officer commanding the Germans, sent Hollingshead hobbling back to the pocket alone, bearing a typed letter demanding our surrender. So, to who exactly would I have said, go to hell? There were no Germans present. There was no parley. There was no flag of truce. I suppose I could have bellowed the words for them to hear all the way to Berlin. I didn't. I folded the letter and I put it in my pocket. I directed Private Hollingshead to the nearest funk hole to lay down and rest his leg, and I went on about my business. You see, no reply was necessary. For this, I received the Medal of Honor.
You sell yourself short, Colonel.
No, I don't, and that's the point. Whatever satisfaction I might take in having performed my duty is forever compromised by a falsehood. My words, I never said, whether explicitly stated in that citation or not, the words, hang their words, I never said, but which I've grown so weary of denying having said, I let them stand, thereby abetting a lie. As I said, ironies abound. No point dwelling on it.
You're very unforgiving yourself.
I suppose I am. Is that the missionary or the socialist in me, I wonder?
Oh, I'd say it's the Puritan. There is the funny little smile.
Any further questions, Mr. Runyon?
Well, you haven't answered my first one. Why?
Because I'm so very, very fatigued.
Are you leaving a note?
Is that the expected thing?
Well, it's traditional.
A few letters, just to set affairs in order. They'll shed no light.
It's a pity.
There is. Never mind.
There is what?
Well, I believe you said that you're partial to Doggerel?
Usually as a perpetrator, but in this case, a willing victim. What have you got?
Well, it's going with me, but perhaps you care to have a look.
Well, I can't get out of this chair. As I mentioned before, I'm not even here. But perhaps a recitation.
Like a school board.
In Flanders fields the poppies grow, between the crosses row on row. Believe me, that will be the bane of thousands and thousands of squirming schoolboys in the decades to come.
Well, this shall be recited only once,
Fair enough.
and then we shall adjourn.
As you wish, Counselor.
It'll be over by Christmas, Blackjack Pershing stated. 40 divisions destroyed, the Hun annihilated. On the 25th of September, we started the fun, the grand assault on the Meuse-Argonne. 600,000 would make the advance, doughboys and Tommies and Frere Jacques from France. 40,000 tons of artillery lit the way, but the Hun, unimpressed, elected to stay. Apparently, they'd yet to receive the news. They were landlords no longer in the Argonne Meuse. They just dug in deeper and put rifle to shoulder and waited well hidden behind bunker and boulder. General Alexander said, spirits high, boys, and bayonets bright. Now forward, men, forward, no retreat from this fight. The 307th was out of New York. There was a Broadway swagger in their walk and their talk. They were Irish, Italian, Chinese, Polish Jews. They were Brooklyn, the Bronx. They were Park Avenues. They were stevedores and salesmen. A tailor named Bernie. They were thieves, thugs, and gamblers, and me, an attorney. Though not a West Pointer, I had commanded these polyglot patriots from the day that we'd landed. We'd fought hard already, shed blood by the ton, as northward we slogged, through the forest Argonne, through the fog in the mist, over rock and ravine, as fire and shrapnel rained down on us from places unseen, past Charleville Brook, toward Charleville Mill. Our objective, Dearborn. We paid a big butcher's bill. 90 men lost on October the 2nd. But worse was to follow. Far worse than I reckoned, for the troops on our flanks, and I'm not going to name them, had failed to advance, and I'm not going to blame them. But we were alone. We were pummeled and pounded by the 3rd of October, completely surrounded. The Teutons attacked with relentless persistence. We formed up the men in a pocket of resistance. It was 60 yards deep and 300 yards wide, with machine guns on flanks and the rifles inside. Defense lines in place, we awaited relief to even the odds ere we all came to grief, but none would arrive. The grand assault, bogged down in the muck. We must fend for ourselves. We must trust to our luck, to our guts and our moxie, our New Yorker grit, like brawling dock workers. Like bears in a pit, they poked us, they prodded, then came the attack, but with hot lead and cold steel, we beat Jerry back, and then there was silence, alone in the fight, and the men hunkered down, keeping watch in the night. The dawn of the 4th was cold, foggy, and wet. No blankets, no overcoats, no food. One last chair, cigarette. By the middle of day, we were in a bad way, but the men told each other it will all be okay. At the roar of an engine, we looked to the skies. A plane, one of ours, it will drop us supplies. But the plane swooped and turned and flew back to the rear. Still, the men were encouraged. Relief must be near. The next several hours are almost too grim to tell, as Allied artillery turned the pocket to hell. Mistaken coordinates, the official report read. Well, you tell that to the wives of the dying and the dead. It's not for me to cast blame or call anyone a liar, but those not lost to the Germans were lost to what's called friendly fire. So, ended the 4th. The 5th was more of the same. No supplies, no relief. Still, I'm loath to throw blame. It was not lack of trying, not want of concern, but the tide of the battle was so slow to turn, and so it went on and on and on. A familiar refrain. And on October 7th, their weapons spit flame. The Flammenwerfer breathes terror, panic, fire. But we shot them down, and they burned in their own funeral pyre. Even now they haunt my dreams. Even now I hear their screams, standing here, breathing air that's fresh. All I smell is burning flesh. And finally, a message demanding our surrender. Not a chance, not a phrase, not one word did I carry. And that was the day that the Allies gained ground, and although never lost, the battalion was found. What was lost were men's lives. But the ordeal was done as we walked limp and were carried from the forest Argonne. Their names are engraved on my heart for all time. Sepeglia, Rosen, Yoder, and Stein, Richards, Gadecki, Krotoshinsky and Manson, Leak and Lepasti, Henchman and Johnson. Living or dead, in my esteem, tall they stand. Oh, and one other hero, not so tall, not even a man. The messenger pigeon, our brave Cher Ami, though when loose to the sky, he just perched in a tree. Go on. Shoot. Shoot. And at last, when the plucky bird took to the air, it was mission accomplished, awarded Croix de Guerre. That's it. May I proceed now, or shall I just stand here and die of embarrassment?
Not at all. It's very rustic. Very doggerel. A tailor named Vernon?
See, it rhymes with attorney and has the added virtue of being true.
And you end with a pigeon receiving the Croix de Guerre.
I thought,
That's pretty rich.
I thought an uplifting and more irony.
Still, it does seem a somewhat, not trivial, but incongruous note to close on.
Well, let's close on this then. Not long ago, on November 11th, I marched the Dead March behind a casket bearing the remains of an unknown soldier as the procession made its way to the Arlington Cemetery. It was solemn, dignified, impressive. Thousands were moved to quiet tears. I felt nothing. Not grief, not pride, neither victorious nor defeated. Nothing. But as the casket was lowered into the tomb, a feeling did blossom in my chest. Envy. I envied this soldier his peace and his solitude. And I envied his anonymity. And the decision was made.
And here you are. Any regrets?
Just one. Back at headquarters on October 8th, an officer handed me a flask of whiskey. It was glass, set in a beautiful, delicate silver filigree. I dropped it, and it shattered. I regret my clumsiness. The conversation is over, Mr. Runyon. Please turn out the light. On some scarred slope of battered hill, when spring comes round again this year, and the first meadow flowers appear, God knows, 'twere better to be deep pillowed in silk and scented down where love breathes out. Cheek, eye to cheek, breath to breath, where hushed awakenings are dear. But I've a rendezvous with death at midnight in some flaming town when spring trips north again this year. And I, to my pledged word, am true. I shall not fail that rendezvous.
It's awfully hard to move from that moment and that suspension of disbelief, but we are determined to follow our Roosevelt House tradition of opening up to questions. And I'm going to invite Stephen back, and I'm going to take the privilege of asking the first one, and then we'll have a microphone, so please ask away. I want to know, and I'm not sure I know, what drew you to Whittlesey, and what do we know, and what do we still don't know? What don't we still know about the Colonel?
We don't know a lot about him. I got drawn to him because I thought it was such a sad story. I wanted to do a piece about World War I. I do pieces about the Medal of Honor. I'm interested in the Medal of Honor, so I wanted to do a piece that had to do with the centenary of World War I. And so obviously there are thousands and thousands of stories to choose from, and I certainly did take an easy route in choosing the Lost Battalion, which of course is probably the most told story. But remarkably little is known about Charles Whittlesey. And the thing that struck me was that in 3 years, after the action, in 1921, Whittlesey booked himself passage to Havana, and after dinner with the captain, stepped out and threw himself into the ocean. And to me, I can't imagine a lonely death than that. And that, the only person I ever had heard of who had done that was Hart Crane, and that filled me with it always makes my bothers that death much more than other suicides somehow. So it's so lonely to me, and so the loneliness of Whittlesey really was appealing to me, and I thought I'm not going to look any further than this. I just found him interesting, and I thought it would be interesting. When I think of Whittlesey, I don't think of him so much in the pocket. I think of him on the deck of that ship, and I wonder if he had bought a full wardrobe for Havana. Had he been fitted with suits and everything like that. He'd left letters, so clearly he was not planning on coming back. But it doesn't happen until it happens, right? He could have gone. And I use the word fatigue in there. Why are you doing? Because I'm so very, very fatigued. And of course, we're all familiar with the term battle fatigue, which was nothing more nor less than what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder. And clearly, this is a man who was so deeply burdened by this, and having to live the life, I just got interested.
Now we're all interested. Anyone have a question? We're all stunned.
Who? Did Whittlesey get involved with the masses? No, he would, you know, his flirtation with socialism had to do with Max being a very persuasive guy, and you know, the tenets of socialism they're good. You know, they're very humanistic, and Whittlesey I think he had a big heart. I think he locked it off a lot, but so it would appeal to him, and I'm sure that Max was very, very persuasive. He didn't engage? No, because what happened was he got. The government took him. You know, they get Medal of Honor recipients out of combat immediately because their value is far more in terms of promotion and propaganda. And they just sent Whittlesey out on the road. And this was a mess. You know, the man was a mess. He was like, within 2 weeks, he's, you know, eating lobsters in New York City, and 2 weeks before, he was in the pocket, and he left behind. You know, they couldn't identify the bodies because the bodies were so busted up from the artillery, and the ones that weren't, they piled as barricades against the Germans because the ground was so wicked. Yeah. And so, you know, you try telling that to Mrs. McGillicuddy, and she says, what happened to Johnny? You know, that's what he had to do. They all wanted help, and he didn't have any help to give them. He didn't have any answers to give them. And finally, he just ran out. You know, but at the same time, he was shilling for the company. The whole time, he was out there raising money for the Liberty bonds. And then this whole business about what I do about the Medal of Honor, about his sort of distaste for the fact that he got it. That's a matter of pure speculation. This whole thing is a matter of speculation. It's a work of imagination. The facts are generally correct, but I know that it's a hell of a thing, I think, to be awarded, you know, for something. And you know, there were mistakes made in this whole thing. He came under a great deal of criticism. Part of the reason he did was because he was a citizen soldier. He wasn't a West Pointer. He wasn't part of the club, right? And so there are guys who would say, well, if we had penetrated that far in, a really, really seasoned soldier would have known to withdraw, right? Maybe that's true. There was a time when they probably could have gotten back before they went in, but he went to where he was supposed to be, and he felt he was unfairly kind of tarred for having obeyed orders, but at the same time he was given the Medal of Honor. I mean, they really just sort of slapped him around.
Also, in the years he's back, so he's working at White and Case, which I think is still a law firm. Yes. So, working at White and Case, and among his campaigns was not only for the Liberty Bonds, but he was also a big spokesman fighting against anti-Semitism that reared up among veterans. Interesting. Questions? We have a microphone. Deborah?
This is just a bit of a comment. I think part of that PTSD, and this would be true of many wars, is the brutality that people encountered that they weren't prepared for. And upstairs in our exhibit, we actually have the gravestone of two twin sisters who worked for the Red Cross in the hospitals over there. And a few months after the war ended, they too left from a ship on their way back to the United States together. And nobody knows why they did that. And it must have been part of that terrible aftermath that people suffered from, both men and women who had come to see the terrible effects of people not only who died, but the injuries also were so massive, and they were unable to treat them in a way that would restore whole life to people. So he was probably not the first and not the last, just like these young women, to respond in that way.
Comments? Questions?
Yeah.
Wait for the mic. Even you.
How much of it is based on Whittlesey's own writings?
None of it.
None of it.
No. That's all I wrote.
You wrote the format.
Originally, I had a line in there. I had a line in there the 307th was out of New York. These boys walked the walk, and these guys talk the talk. And Larry Brand, my friend Larry Brand is here, who is Larry curated the photographs, which I think he said to me, you know, if you want to pass this off as Whittlesey's writing, you should get rid of that line because it really is contemporaneous. And he said, and the other one is you should get rid of friendly fire because that's contemporaneous. And so I did research on both of them, and you're absolutely wrong that I could in fact have said walk the walk and talk the talk. It first appears in about 1914, but I agree with you on that, and I also like Broadway swagger in their walk. But friendly fire, I couldn't come up with something that I liked more than that. I mean, it just said, and then I thought, I don't care if they.
Yes.
When did you write this, and what are your plans?
Well, it was about 2 years ago I decided I wanted to do a World War I piece, and so I put it on the list of all the things I want to do that I'm never going to do, right? And it's a substantial list. And then what happened was, well, in answer to when I wrote, what happened was Symphony Space. You know, I used to be connected with Symphony Space back in the days when Isaiah Scheffer, a beloved memory, ran it. And Isaiah passed away now about 4 or 5 years ago. And I've fallen out of touch with Symphony Space. And as it happened, the new executive director got in touch with me, and her name is Kathy Landau, which means that she is the sister of John Landau, who is my producer on Avatar. So I felt by doing something for her, I could enhance my status when I needed something from him. But what happened was, it always happens that the only way I can deliver anything is with a deadline. So she was saying, we want to get you back. And so I said, and this happened not quite a year ago. I said, I'll tell you what, I want to write a World War I piece, and if you'll give me, if you want me to do it on Veterans Day, I'll commit to doing that, and I'll have a piece, because I'll commit to anything a year in advance. And so she did, and so it was kind of lurking there, you know, like a migraine just on the edge of the brain. I've got to write this damn piece. And so I was doing my reading and stuff like that, and then I was in New Zealand working in New Zealand this spring, and one day I just had this kind of thought that I remembered that the way that so much of was expressed by soldiers in World War I was through this sort of doggerel type poetry. It's all over the place. In fact, that kind of narrative poetry had it was a time when it really, really flourished. In fact, Joseph Moncure March, who I've always loved, he wrote The Wild Party and The Setup, both of which are book-length poems in rhymed couplets, just like this, both of which were on the New York Times bestseller list. So this, back in the 20s, so this was a form that had currency. And I thought, that's the form that I can take. And once I knew that, then the dialogue was not difficult to frame. When I usually write stuff, I only write it for myself. I'm easier to act with. You know, it's better that way. Cast parties are boring. But in this one, I really couldn't keep another. I had to have another voice come in, and so and I knew it would be a journalist, and I just called him Runyon, and it's certainly not a picture of Runyon that I've created here, but Runyon was actually on site when Alexander promoted him, so I just called him Runyon, and my thanks to Jim Naughton for doing it. You know, the thing is, we didn't have any rehearsal at all. This entire process was conducted by email, and we met today at 2 o'clock, and we ran through it. So, you know, I want to suggest to you all that you come to Symphony Space, which is selling well. I'm not, you know, but if you come to Symphony Space, I suspect I'll give a far more relaxed performance. I'm going to hear about this performance from my family at some point, because I know I was adrenalized and full of fear, anger, and hatred. It's just the way it is. This was the first preview. I went up on something. So, any other questions? I'm happy to.
Right here. Wait for the mic.
Yes.
As an amateur military art historian, I would just like to make an observation. Although before I do that, I have greatly enjoyed your portraits of Civil War in Gettysburg and the Dodson generals of Pickett and Jackson and those wonderful portraits. From a military perspective, I would just say that the quality of the German army by 1918 was spent. I mean, they lost over 300,000 men in the Ludendorff offensives before and as we became involved in the First World War. So that though the stand of the 307th is noble, certainly, but the quality of the German army that was attacking them just did not have the same spirit and enthusiasm that the Americans had, who were fresh and attacked with a recklessness that had not been seen on the Western Front since 1914, when indeed the French and the Germans threw themselves recklessly at machine guns the way we were doing in 1918. We paid a horrific price for it, over 300,000 casualties for the brief time that we were in World War I. So I just wanted to have a military.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and also the casualties, American casualties in the last week of the war, before the armistice. You know, when you can smell an armistice in the air, which everybody could, nobody wants to be the last one to get killed, right? You don't want to die on the last day of a war, you know, that's what a stupid thing to ask. And so, everybody was backing off, big time, except the Americans, because we got there late, because we hadn't spent enough blood, right? And they kept throwing guys at the last day of battle. We had Americans and Germans dying on the last day of battle, you know, when the armistice had been declared. It was very reckless. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was interested
Microphone comment.
I was interested in your choice of Alan Seeger's poem to begin and end the piece today. And of course, World War I is known for its poets, its war poets. I guess Seeger obviously had a New York connection, but I was wondering why you chose that to use. Lines are obviously appropriate.
Yeah, I just thought it was an appropriate poem. You know, it was published relatively early. I mean, you know, Seeger died at the Somme in 14 or 15. Exactly. Well done. He was fighting for the French Foreign Legion at the time because we weren't in the war. He wanted to be in the war, so he went and, you know, got what he wanted. But this was published posthumously. So, there's no question that Whittlesey would have known this poem. And I think that it probably stands as one of the 2 or 3 most important poems of that war. And the line, maybe he will take my hand and lead me into his dark land, and his dark land just right away. Now, that was the title of the piece, so I really had to use the poem. And I think it's a nice book, you know, I love the poem.
So I think we're going to invite you all upstairs to meet the fabulous people who performed today. We thank James Naughton, and of course we thank Stephen.